All right. So here we are again today with another episode of our Women in Electronics radio podcast, our Leader and Highlight podcast. And today I'm very honored to have somebody here today that has just been so refreshing. Terri Walsh from Rutronic. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Jackie. This is incredibly inspiring for me as well. And my first podcast, so take it easy on me.
Really? Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. So this is actually the most fun thing of what I do with Women in Electronics is having that ability and the honor to be able to talk to some of our leaders and highlight them. And I learn so much from all of you. So thank you for being here. So first of all, a lot of us have been in this industry for some time. So let's just open up. I always like to ask people that, like, how did you get here in this industry?
Good question. And it's really hard to believe, but in January of 2024, next year, I will be in this industry for 30 years. I started out.
Goodness.
It's crazy. You blink and 30 years goes by. I started out as an entry-level engineer, worked in manufacturing and operations for 11 years. And throughout that time, those 11 years, I had the opportunity to both live and work in Taiwan and Japan as well. So that really kind of helped create my career and perspective moving forward. But after that, I moved on to product management, then sales, then marketing, through the many stages and changes of what's now TE connectivity. And then about 19 months ago, I came to Rutronic. It's really interesting for me. I was fortunate enough to be presented with this really amazing opportunity by the executive leadership team at Rutronic. It was really one that I couldn't pass up. You know, I had all of this experience across different categories or genres within our business. And, it was the opportunity to utilize 28 years of all this experience. But first and foremost, I think really most importantly, it was a way to continue my own personal development and really own my own career growth.
It's helpful to know that it's okay to hop in and learn, and that you don't have to know everything about the job to go after the job, because you should know 60% like the back of your hand, or bring those skills naturally, and then be willing to learn a lot. And that's the scary thing, right? About taking these advanced roles. So I don't know if you want to comment on that real quick before the next question I have for you.
It is definitely in your mind, you're taking a risk. But you have to recognize that risk reward, right? The pros versus the cons. And, after 28 years and just recognizing that, quite frankly, this was kind of my shot. Sometimes you just have to jump into the deep end, feet first, and recognize that you have what it takes to get the job done.
I like that. Just jump in the deep end. So, okay. So as you're jumping, okay, right? As you're coming in with all of you. You're coming in with what your skill set is. You're coming in with your values. You're coming in with your leadership style. So let's talk about that real quick, because one thing that we tend to talk about on our Leader and Highlight podcast is values, and what does leadership look like moving forward. So the whole purpose of this Leader and Highlight is, yes, to appreciate and acknowledge the leaders, but actually to have a form of mentorship for us all too, of what tidbits can we take from all the leaders that are having success, because what leadership looks like moving forward is very different from what got us here. What's getting us forward is kind of a different picture of leadership. But one thing it does include is values. Value-based leadership is so essential in this time. So what values do you bring to the table?
I think from my perspective, and I don't know if you would classify this as a value or not, but it was really my first chance to really build a culture and a team almost from the ground up, and really focus on what we, generally term inclusivity, right? And it's something I wanted for a very long time, I think, because, I've seen and had my own personal struggles. I've seen the struggles of others. And I'm really proud to say, without really a ton of effort, we've created this incredible team. And it's all about being different, but in the same way, the same. And in that one way, it's really entrepreneurial in spirit, because that's really what Retronic in North America needs at this point in time. But, it's that acceptance of our differences that makes us stronger, but differences are still differences, right? And it isn't always easy. And I think we always want to paint a picture where, life is easy and we get these pretty pictures through our social media. And we're kind of somewhat cultured now to expect that, things come easily. And it's really not the case. And I would say that for me, in terms of, some of the leadership and some of the values that we create, is really kind of seeking to understand. And I think when you have a culture of differences, that's what's really important, is that we take a moment, we pause, we really understand where the person is coming from, because a lot happens through text, a lot happens through emails, and there's a lot left open for interpretation at the end of the day. And I think it's really crucial and important that as we move forward, we don't pass judgment before taking that time to just simply seek to understand. And in the end, it's really what I try to do, and lead by example, to be honest.
I love that. And really, it's such a good point because here we are, women in electronics, we're regularly advocating for inclusion, but it's not easy. And I love that message because we're not saying you're going to have an inclusive team and it's just going to be a walk in the park. It actually, when you're dealing with differences and different perspectives, now you're getting into a whole nother set, right, of challenges, but
Yeah,
can be overcome very well. But it's a process. This whole team building experience as we move forward is such a process, right? And
100%.
we have to evolve with that, right?
Evolve with it, embrace it, and recognize that there's going to be steps along the way, that aren't as easy as you think they should be, perhaps, but stick with it, because in the end, I mean, that's really what it's all about, right? Is having that inclusive and diverse team.
So leaders embrace the challenge. I love that. Okay, so as a woman leader in the industry, um, what advances do you think we have made as women? Where's the gap still? And what are some of your personal experiences that you can share with us?
So, I mean, I think in general, right, I've seen positive changes over the course of the last 30 years. I've seen changes in maternity leave policies. I've seen changes in supporting the return to work. After, things like a maternity break, as an example, I've seen work from home initiatives that, make it, I think, easier to juggle work and home. So there's definitely been some positive momentum. And I think one of the most positive things that I've seen is just like your organization, quite frankly. It's the ability for women to come together, women to unite, not only to just discuss the topics, but to be able to be able to support, to be able to enable each other, and then really importantly, to be able to incite change that's needed in our industry, quite frankly.
Right. And I think the thing when I started off, I said you're a refreshing leader to me because you are a woman who supports other women. We don't always see that. And there's a lot of reasons for that in a male dominated industry. I think that women's power is leading with the feminine side,
Yep.
the natural, um we have some natural ability to care about other people, to offer kindness, to offer support. Those are such natural skills that I think you have that I love about you. But you also get along well with your male colleagues. And I notice
Mhm.
that part of why women sometimes don't advance or these types of initiatives,
Mhm.
just because women support other women and want women to advance, it doesn't mean they're against men, right? Like we
Correct.
love our male colleagues. It has nothing to do with
100%.
that. So I do think it's education in that area too. Is like, what does empowerment look like? What does that mean? I've realized it's so different from everybody for everyone. So for you, just to pause there for a moment, how do you feel about that whole concept of maybe women's empowerment or how this looks like for women and men coming together?
To me, it's has to be probably the most important thing for me personally. And I say that from my own personal perspective. I've been blessed in my life with one biological son and two bonus sons, and I'm incredibly proud of them. And I'm proud to say, first and foremost, my first bonus son, he works with me here at Rotronic, so he's in internal sales and he's doing a bang up job. Um, my other bonus son is an adult with special needs. And it's been really interesting over the course of the last 15 years watching his development, watching him come out of his shell, playing a part in his development as well, which for me is incredibly gratifying. And then my biological son, he's a senior at Florida State. And he wants to pursue medical school kind of as next steps. But what's really interesting is when you start to see I'll call it parent child relationship shift. And that's what's kind of happening for me. I'll wake up, he'll maybe find an inspiring quotation or part of a devotional or something, and I'll wake up to a text in the morning. And it's ironic because it's exactly what I needed at that moment, at that time, to get me through that day. And without, I should say, last but not least, is I have an incredibly supportive husband. He is 100%, bar none, my biggest fan and biggest supporter. And for me, when I talk about allyship, my life, my closest circle in life depends on the support that I get from the men in my life. And so for me to extend that out into the personal and from personal to professional is just kind of a natural translation. And I think it's one we all have to embrace, because without the men in my professional development, for sure, I would not have had the opportunities that I've had to date.
I love that. And you know what? You're also just a supporting, a mother figure. I love that you have that love for them. And I was talking to one of our leaders yesterday, and here's the point too. It's like we're always focused, I look at a lot of our leaders and they're so focused on helping and motivating others and helping others launch, which is the purpose of leadership. But we always have to remember too, for others to support the leaders as well, because I look at people like you, like we're just human beings, right? And so you need that refreshment and that support. Like you said, your bonus son sends you these inspirational quotes.
Yeah.
That is such a good example of what we could do for our leaders, is to send them inspiration, because they're actually on the line to go hand that out to so many people, right? To offer themselves and to offer all that replenishment to so many. So I love that you said that. But really, speaking of
Mhm.
bonus sons and husbands and sons and family and friends and all this, how do you keep your life balanced? Because that's one of the main topics I would say that we hear from women electronics, from female leaders, is that life balance, which, some people say it's just like it's impossible, right? Like it's like, but how do you maintain some type of life balance? Like, how does
Yeah.
this work for you?
And listen, I think at every stage that a woman goes through, right, from, when I first graduated from college to now, obviously there's different stages in motherhood, different stages in career growth. And so for me, that evolves over time, right? And you, quite frankly, you do the best that you can in that moment. All right. So
Yes.
sometimes it's a challenge.
Yes.
Not for nothing. I think at the end of the day, I think, we want to want everything and we want to want it right now, right? And we think we can be everywhere at once. And of course, technology helps some of that. But at the end of the day, you're one person. You've mentioned it before. And you have to choose and pick your priorities. You have to. It's not easy, and it's not an easy decision to make. And I will tell you, I have chosen different priorities to the point where this opportunity at Rotronic came to me at 50 years old. So never say never. Always keep your eye on the ball. Make the right decisions for you. I knew that when my son was growing up, I was never ever going to get that time back with him. And I am so grateful. I've worked the entire time. I never took any time off, but I definitely made career decisions that allowed me to be with him, to be closer to him through his development. And it's made all the difference in the world.
I love that because, one leader said you can have everything, just not all at the same time. And I think that's so true. You have to we talked about values, lead starting this conversation. It was a value for you to have that as your core foundational
100%.
value to be there for your son. And
Mhm.
then other times, if you're not as needed and you have other people who could help at home, your value is to work and build that career. And so I think for women, we tend to get on ourselves. We want to be excelling at work. We want to be excelling in our home life. But there always is something that kind of has to take a back seat. And that's just the way it goes. And if you're honest and talk about it, like, okay, this is what I'm focused on, doesn't mean you don't matter. It just means that I have to put this, you know, as a priority right now in my life. But do we talk about it and really understand that we have to make these shifts? Some leaders, like you said, you have a supportive husband.
Mhm.
It enables you to then go focus on your career in a way that you need to right now because you have more support right at home. So I think these are just important decisions and conversations for women to understand they don't have to be everything all the time.
Yeah, I think we're so critically hard on ourselves by nature.
Yeah.
I 100% fall into that category. And a lot of times I spend, time talking and mentoring others. And I'm honest and say, do as I say, not as I do, because I don't take a lot of breaks, but you should take breaks.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think what I've learned, kind of throughout my journey, especially the last 19 months or so, is it's a little bit lonely. Leadership is lonely. And I think we don't talk enough about that either. And I think if you're putting yourself out there and you're being vulnerable and you're sharing your story and it gives opportunity for people to scrutinize, even though you're trying to do the right things and you're trying to be a change agent, at the end of the day, you're trying to help others. And it's not an easy path. Because a lot of times, we want to sugarcoat it and we want to be, it's all happy and it's all greatness. But the truth is, it's hard. And when it looks easy, it's probably anything but easy.
No, I love that message so much because it can be very lonely. For
Mhm.
instance, this past 4th of July, while everybody's off having fun, I was working, getting some stuff done. It
Right,
it, it literally sometimes you just got to do what you got to do, and people
right.
don't really talk about that part of it. There's always a sacrifice. So okay,
Hmm.
now we have a couple more questions.
Okay.
These interviews go so fast. I just can't believe it. I wish we had a lot more time, but I do want to talk about I want to talk about your mentors. I also want to
Mhm.
talk about your
Yeah.
learning lessons as a leader and then one or two other things. But let's
Yeah.
get into that because as we're rising, we're talking about life balance, we're talking about family issues and things like that. How, what has helped you and who have been your mentors and how
Yeah.
have you managed up to this point?
Yeah, I think I've been really fortunate. I've had a ton of people who, from early on have really kind of maybe recognized in me what I didn't recognize in myself. And so I think probably the most obvious is my parents. I grew up in Pennsylvania, a very small town. I was good at math, surrounded by a great group of teachers, and so naturally I thought, hey, math teacher when I came to college. It was really my dad that encouraged me to pursue engineering. Neither of my parents graduated from college, but my dad worked with engineers. And he told me, hey, listen, you're good at art and you're good at math. And you have to remember, like back in that day, drafting was still done by hand, right? And that was the art part of it. And I started to take a look at it, and that's when I came to really end up at Penn State, and I majored in architectural engineering. So here's the funny part, which my mom said after reading all the different descriptions of the engineering discipline, says to me, "I really think you shouldn't be an industrial engineer," and I'm like, "No." I want to be an architectural engineer. So it turns out in the end, both my parents were right. And so that's how I got into engineering to begin with. And then I had kind of a pivotal moment, and it came early on for me. It was my senior year in high school. And I had one teacher in particular, Mr. Max Hunsicker, and he ran our choir department. And it was my senior year. We were trying out for the spring musical. And we were doing Once Upon a Mattress. And it's kind of a takeoff. It's a funny version of The Princess and the Pea if you've never heard or seen it. And in the original, Carol Burnett played the lead character, which she's fabulously funny, right? And when tryouts came, I stood up and I was trying out for what I would consider like a lesser lead role. And he looked at me and he asked me what I was doing. And I was a little bit perplexed. And I said, trying out? And he looked at me and he said, no. He said, you're Winifred. And looking back, it wasn't about, I was judging myself on, I'm not sure I have, the right singing, the right stage presence, the right whatever. But he looked at me and he recognized my strengths. He knew I would be able to basically carry this character. And it was really the first time, I think, outside of my family that somebody stepped up, pushed me out of my comfort zone, believed in my ability when I didn't have belief in my own ability, to say, listen, you have more to give. And so for me, that was a really big turning point.
I love that. Okay, so that is what, in essence, leaders are supposed to do, is
Correct.
point out the strengths in others when sometimes they can't even see it in themselves and push them
Right.
in that direction. I love that. So you had mentioned before too, trusting your gut. And I think that's a natural thing for women in particular to capitalize on. Not that men don't have that. I'm not saying that. I'm
Mhm.
saying that women naturally have that gut instinct that we hear about. And really, I've heard you talk about that before. And
Mhm.
that I think is a major critical point too.
Well, I think that, you're never going to have everything line up perfectly, right? You're going to have some of the data points, not 100% of the data points to make the most accurate decision. And I think, too, as women, we second guess ourselves. I find myself second guessing myself. And then I find myself saying, if I would have just trusted my gut to begin with, I would have saved a lot of time, right? And
Yeah.
that's where I feel that, we have to be willing, right? We have to be willing to take input from others. We have to be willing to assess the situation fully, right? And come into it with an open mind. We also have to be willing to pivot, right? We can't just be so focused and narrow-minded that, our way is the right way. But at the end of the day, trust your gut. Pivot where you need to. And I think one of the things that we also have to be okay with is that tiny steps forward are still is still forward momentum, right? We want to make these huge gains all the time, which is great. Personally, I'm the same way. And sometimes I just have to sit back and say, okay, we're not exactly where I want to be, but what have we accomplished in the last quarter? And quite frankly, remind my team what we've accomplished in the last quarter, because when you get so tight and so close to some of this, it's really sometimes hard
Yes.
to just showcase
Yes.
what you have done. And so that's a really important thing as well.
And it's an amazing point because I find, I'm just saying in my experience,
Mhm.
that I think in general that tends to be a superpower of men as far as
Yeah.
pivoting, being able to do that quicker and being agile. I think with women we get very perfectionistic, and the
Right.
pivoting part, the change part, I find a lot of women like a process and they just want to follow something. But that is such a critical point. If you want to be in leadership and you want to advance, learn how to pivot and not take things so personally. Just if it doesn't work, shift, go in a different direction.
Right. Fact-based, non-emotional, make a
Yes.
decision, move on.
Move on. And if it wasn't the right decision, shift again, right? And that's where we can learn as women to advance and not taking everything so personally. I don't see a lot of times a lot of our male colleagues really ruminating about a decision they made and then they had to switch. They don't even look at it like a failure, and it's not. That's where our male colleagues can mentor a lot in that area. I want to bring up the topic of feminism
Hmm.
because, we hear these terms, and I even had my initial reaction is something, and I want to talk about that with you because as women leaders, what do we think of about feminism? What do we think it is? What do we think it isn't? And how do you feel about that?
Well, I think you know this, but you taught me the definition of feminism because at first when you said to me, "Are you a feminist?" and I'm like, "No," right? Because there's this stigma. And then you were like, "Do you realize what the definition of feminism is? The advocacy of women's rights on the basis of equality of the sexes." And I'm like, "No." And you challenged me. You're like, "Isn't that what we do?" And I'm like, "Exactly what we do, right?" I think at the end of the day, we all just want the most qualified candidate to get the job. It doesn't matter the gender, ethnicity, other classifications we put on ourselves. Um, we just want the most qualified person to get the job in the end or win out in the end. And I think, those of us who are in this business just want to have that chance.
Hopping into the very last question, because this is my favorite and I saved the best for last, is what is it, we talk about leadership and how different it is moving forward and how we have to bring the human component with us now to the leadership table. If we want to lead teams successfully and have retention, right, as we move forward. So what that entails is a lot of emotional intelligence, introspection, leaders to really know themselves. So, having said that, for you as a human being, what is it that brings you joy? And then what it is that makes you cry in your soul?
Connecting with people brings me joy. And I find that that's one thing that I really love about this new role at Rutronic, right? I've been able to really expand the people that I'm meeting on a, just like yourself, right? Just on a constant and continual basis. And what I'm really hoping is that, those connections really kind of grow into friendships and then last a lifetime, right? I mean, that's what I really appreciate and makes me happy. I think just in life, because I think it's more about the people than it is about any material possession that really matter in your life. And so for me, it's all about the people and helping others. And, whether that's mentoring, whether that's giving in, to charitable events like we have started at Retronic, and just really helping those less fortunate. It's all about the people. Um, the second part's a little bit harder to talk about. What makes me cry? I swear, no matter how hard I try, and I'm going to do my best not to cry.
You
Um,
should cry.
for the
It's
rating.
okay to cry. Yes, it's okay to cry.
Yeah. On February 14th, 2018, it was a pivotal moment in my life and my family's life because my son, I cry,
Okay,
was at,
cry about the things that should be cried about. It's
yeah,
okay.
yeah, was at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. And that's the day a shooter came in and killed 17 staff and students. And he's 21 now. Like I mentioned before, he's a senior heading into Florida, in Florida State. He's done really well, but he was a sophomore that day. And it was a really scary day, when you're getting more information from CNN than you are, through any other media channel. And you're watching like the live footage at the school. And whether you know they're safe or not, they're not really safe until they're with you and you can physically see them.
Yes.
And, that day, not to belabor it, but he was essentially in a closet for 3.5 hours and it waited for SWAT to clear. And then we've had, all of the rest around it, right? Because we were one of the lucky ones. He came home that day. So
It's like every mother's worst, every parent's worst nightmare.
there's the silver lining, quite frankly, is it really taught us a life lesson, right? And any days prior to that, and really, quite frankly, any days since that, it doesn't compare in terms of what we would call a bad day. And I always tell my kids, life is about perspective.
Yep.
And when you're able to put something in perspective and really understand, um, is this a bad day or not a bad day or a good day or whatever qualification you would have, you put upon it, you know, nothing will ever compare to that. And I think it's really kind of helped our family in general. Just know that really no matter what, we press on.
having those types of experiences as a human being probably makes you way more sensitive to your team.
Very sensitive. And I think there are times when, even when I'm addressing the team, there's different things that happen, of course, through the course of that. Honestly, people that I've met because, again, another silver lining, because of what happened here in Parkland, Florida, to be able to, really kind of grow from that experience and then being able to share from that experience. And I use it a lot, actually, as a reference point, even in a lot of the work that I do with the team, just so they can understand kind of some of the background, why it's important to me, and then importantly, what the lesson learned is moving forward.
Thank God your son was okay. Thank God. And also just, a little shout out and prayers for those families, right? Who didn't have the outcome that you had. And just, I'm sure you always keep that with you. I'm sure that's part of your tears too, is knowing that that could have been you. Always remembering them. So, but with that, we are out of time, and I have so enjoyed this opportunity to chat with you. And also, thank you, Terri and Rutronic, for being a sponsor of Women in Electronics. It really is beneficial to our programs to have sponsors like you behind us. So, thank you so much for that.
It's really our pleasure. And thank you again for everything that you do to promote women in electronics. It's incredibly important, for the future of the industry. And you have our full support.
Thank you so much.
Bye.